She was sold like a slave, to the most feared monster in the werewolf world. A ruthless Lycan King who had one rule. No human was ever allowed to survive his castle. But the moment he looked into her eyes, everything changed. Because the weak human girl he bought was not just his prisoner. She was his true mate, and the most powerful which the moon goddess had ever chosen. And what happened next shocked the entire werewolf kingdom. The night of betrayal. The night Elena turned 18 should have been the happiest night of her life. Instead, it became the night her life was sold. A cold wind whispered through the trees surrounding the small village of Ravenshade. The forest was unusually quiet tonight, as if even the animals knew something terrible was about to happen. Elena stood outside the small wooden house she had lived in her entire life. The moon hung high in the sky, glowing brighter than usual. A full moon. Her long auburn hair danced softly in the wind as she stared into the dark forest. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. She wrapped her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. Father said he would return before midnight, she whispered softly to herself. But midnight had already passed. Elena's father, Marcus, had been acting strangely for weeks. He barely spoke to her anymore. Whenever she asked questions, he would simply say he was handling something important. At first, she thought it was money problems. Their family had always been poor. But tonight, something felt darker. A distant sound suddenly echoed through the trees. Hoofbeats. Elena's heart skipped. A carriage was approaching. But no one in Ravenshade owned a carriage like that. The sound grew louder. Soon, a massive black carriage emerged from the fog, pulled by two powerful dark horses. The vehicle looked expensive, far too expensive for a poor village like this. The carriage stopped directly in front of her house. Elena's stomach twisted. The door of the carriage slowly opened. Two tall men stepped out. They wore long black coats and carried themselves with the quiet confidence of predators. Their eyes glowed faintly gold in the moonlight. Elena froze. Werewolves. Everyone in the region knew the legends. Beyond the forest ruled the most feared creature in the supernatural world. The Lycan King. And these men. They were clearly part of his pack. Elena stepped back slowly. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. One of the men stepped forward. His voice was calm. "Are you Elena Marcus?" Her heart pounded. "Yes." The men exchanged a look. Then one of them spoke words that made her blood run cold. "Good. We're here to collect you." Elena frowned. "Collect me?" Just then, the door of the house creaked open behind her. Her father stepped outside. Marcus looked older tonight, his shoulders slumped as if carrying a terrible weight. "Elena," he said quietly. She turned toward him. "Father, what's going on?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward the two werewolves. Then he handed one of them a small leather document. The man opened it and nodded. "Payment has already been made," the werewolf said. Elena's heart began to race. "Payment? For what?" she asked. Her father still refused to meet her eyes. The second werewolf spoke. "For you." Silence filled the cold night air. Elena blinked. "I don't understand." Her father finally looked at her. And the guilt in his eyes shattered her heart. "I had no choice," Marcus whispered. Her voice shook. "No choice about what?" The first werewolf stepped forward again. "You were sold." The words struck her like a physical blow. "Sold." "No," Elena whispered. Her father's voice cracked. "Our debts, they were too large." Elena's entire world collapsed in that moment. "You sold me?" she asked, barely able to breathe. Marcus closed his eyes. "They offered enough gold to save the village." Her hands trembled. "You sold your daughter." The werewolves moved closer. "Come quietly," one of them said. "The king does not like delays." Elena's heart stopped. "The king?" The man nodded. "The Lycan King." Fear shot through her body. Everyone knew the stories. The Lycan King was ruthless, cold, and terrifying. "No," she said, backing away. "You can't do this." Her father didn't move, didn't speak, didn't defend her. The realization crushed her. He had truly sold her. Tears filled her eyes. "Please, don't make me go," she begged. But the werewolves grabbed her arms. "Forgive me," Marcus whispered. Elena screamed as they dragged her toward the carriage. The door slammed shut behind her. Moments later, the carriage began moving, taking her deeper into the forest, toward the castle of the most feared creature in the supernatural world, the ruthless Lycan King. But none of them knew one terrifying truth. The girl they had just sold was the king's true mate. And once he discovered it, nothing in the world would be able to stop what was coming. The castle of the Lycan King. The carriage raced through the dark forest like a shadow fleeing the night. Inside, Elena sat frozen against the cold wooden seat, her hands trembling in her lap. The lantern hanging from the carriage ceiling swung slightly with every bump in the road, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Her heart still pounded from the moment she had been dragged away from her home. Sold. The word echoed painfully inside her mind. Her own father had traded her life like a piece of property. Elena closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. Why would he do this to me? Outside, the sound of the horses galloping through the forest felt endless. The deeper they traveled, the darker the woods became. The trees grew taller. The fog grew thicker. And the air felt colder. A strange feeling crept over Elena. She had lived near the forest her entire life, but this part felt different. Ancient. Dangerous. Almost alive. Suddenly, the carriage slowed. Elena sat up, her heart racing again. They were stopping. The door of the carriage swung open. Moonlight poured inside. One of the werewolf guards stood there, his glowing golden eyes fixed on her. "We've arrived," he said coldly. Elena hesitated. What is this place?" The guard didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed her arm and helped her step down from the carriage. The moment her feet touched the ground, Elena gasped. Before her stood the most enormous castle she had ever seen. Towering black stone walls stretched high into the sky. Massive towers rose like dark claws against the moonlight. Torches burned along the walls, illuminating soldiers patrolling the gates. But these weren't ordinary soldiers. They were werewolves. Dozens of them. Their golden eyes glowed in the darkness as they watched her. Fear crawled through Elena's body. This wasn't just a castle. It was a kingdom. The kingdom of the Lycan King. The guard began leading her toward the entrance. The giant gates slowly creaked open as they approached. Inside the castle courtyard, more warriors stood guard. Some were in human form, while others remained in their massive wolf forms. Their eyes followed Elena as she walked past them. Some looked curious. Others looked amused. And a few looked pitying. That terrified her the most. They entered the castle. The inside was just as intimidating as the outside. Tall black pillars stretched up toward a vaulted ceiling. Huge chandeliers hung above, glowing with golden firelight. The marble floors echoed with every step she took. Elena felt impossibly small. The guard stopped in front of a large pair of iron doors. Two enormous wolves sat beside the entrance, their massive bodies resting quietly but their glowing eyes alert. The guard turned to her. "The king is inside." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The king. Her hands began shaking. She had heard countless terrifying stories about the Lycan King growing up. They said he was merciless. That he could kill a man with a single glance. That entire packs trembled when he walked into a room. And now, she was about to meet him. The guard pushed the doors open. The room beyond was enormous. A grand throne hall. Red banners hung along the walls, each bearing the silver crest of a wolf's head. At the far end of the hall sat a massive throne carved from black stone. And on that throne sat the most terrifying man Elena had ever seen. The Lycan King. He was tall even while sitting, his broad shoulders draped in a dark cloak lined with fur. His black hair fell slightly across his forehead, and his sharp jawline looked like it had been carved from stone. But it was his eyes that froze Elena in place. They glowed an intense, dangerous gold. Predator's eyes. Ancient. Powerful. The moment Elena stepped into the room, those glowing eyes locked onto her. Silence filled the hall. The king slowly stood. The entire room seemed to grow colder. Elena felt the power radiating from him like a storm ready to explode. This man wasn't just a king. He was a monster wearing a crown. He began walking toward her. Every step echoed heavily through the hall. Her heart pounded faster and faster. This is the man who bought me. The king stopped a few feet away from her. His expression was unreadable. Cold. Unimpressed. "You are the human girl," he said. His voice was deep and commanding, like distant thunder rolling across the mountains. Elena swallowed hard. "Yes. Your Majesty." He studied her carefully. His golden eyes moved slowly from her face to her hair, her hands, and then back to her eyes. As if analyzing her. Judging her. Then something strange happened. The king suddenly froze. His nose twitched slightly. He leaned closer. And inhaled deeply. Elena stiffened. "What are you doing?" She whispered nervously. But the king didn't answer. His eyes widened slightly. Confusion flashed across his face. Then disbelief. Suddenly, his glowing eyes darkened with something far more dangerous. Shock. "No," he muttered under his breath. The guards around the room looked at each other nervously. The king stepped even closer to Elena. So close she could feel the heat of his body. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Impossible." Elena's heart raced. "What is?" The king stared directly into her eyes. And in that moment, something exploded between them. A strange warmth shot through Elena's chest. Her breath caught. Her heart began beating wildly. A powerful energy pulsed between them. The king's expression darkened. He stepped back suddenly as if burned. "This cannot be happening," he growled. The entire room fell silent. The guards looked confused. One of them spoke carefully. "My king, what is wrong?" The Lycan King's golden eyes never left Elena. And when he spoke again, his voice was filled with anger and disbelief. "She is my mate." The entire throne room gasped. Because the girl they had just bought was the fated mate of the most powerful alpha in the world. The king rejects the bond. The words echoed across the throne room like a thunderclap. "She is my mate." For a moment, no one moved. The guards standing along the walls stared in stunned silence. Even the enormous wolves guarding the throne doors lifted their heads, their glowing eyes fixed on Elena. The Lycan King's mate. The most powerful bond in the werewolf world. And yet, the king's expression wasn't joyful. It was furious. Elena stood frozen, struggling to understand what had just happened. "Mate," she whispered. She had heard the word before. Everyone in the villages near the forest knew the stories about werewolf mating bonds. They said when a wolf found their mate, it was destiny. Unbreakable. Sacred. But the way the Lycan King was staring at her now, there was nothing loving in his eyes. Only anger. "No," the king growled suddenly. His voice shook the entire room. "This is impossible." The guards exchanged nervous glances. Elena's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. The king turned away from her as if looking at her was painful. "I do not accept this." The words struck Elena like a slap. "What?" The king ran a hand through his dark hair, clearly fighting something inside himself. "The moon goddess would never bind me to a human." His glowing eyes flashed back toward her. This must be a mistake. Elena felt something twist painfully in her chest. A mistake. He thought she was a mistake. "I didn't ask for this," she said softly. The king scoffed. "Of course you didn't." He began pacing across the throne room like a caged predator. Every step radiated dangerous energy. "You are human," he said coldly. "Yes. You have no wolf. No. You have no power." Elena hesitated. I don't know." The king stopped pacing. His golden eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Elena shook her head quickly. Nothing. I just meant. Enough. His voice cut her off instantly. The king turned toward his guards. Leave us. The warriors hesitated. My king. I said leave. The command echoed through the hall like a crack of lightning. One by one, the guards bowed their heads and exited the throne room. Soon the enormous chamber was empty. Only Elena and the Lycan King remained. The silence felt suffocating. The king approached her again, slower this time. Elena's heart pounded harder with every step he took. He stopped inches away from her. Up close, his presence felt overwhelming. His scent was wild and powerful, like storm clouds and forest earth. Tell me something, human, he said quietly. Elena. He raised an eyebrow. What? My name, she said. It's Elena. For a moment, the king simply stared at her. Then he sighed. Fine. Elena. He circled her slowly. Do you know who I am? Yes. And who am I? She swallowed. The Lycan King. The ruler of all werewolf packs. The most feared alpha alive. He nodded slightly. Correct. Then his voice turned colder. And do you understand why this situation is unacceptable? Elena shook her head. Because you're human. The words cut deeply. You think humans are weak. They are. His answer came instantly. Humans cannot survive the life of a Lycan queen. The enemies of this kingdom would tear you apart. Elena lifted her chin. Maybe I'm stronger than you think. The king actually laughed. A deep, dark sound. You are brave, he admitted. But bravery will not save you. He stopped in front of her again. The mate bond pulsed between them like an invisible thread. Elena could feel it. A strange warmth in her chest. But the king seemed determined to fight it. I will not accept this bond, he said firmly. Elena's stomach dropped. What does that mean for me? The king's eyes hardened. You will remain here. As a prisoner. As my responsibility. That wasn't comforting. You bought me, Elena said bitterly. Yes. Why? The king's expression darkened. I didn't buy you personally. Her heart skipped. What? You were part of a trade agreement with your village. Elena frowned. My father said you paid for me. He lied. Silence fell between them again. Then why am I here? Elena asked. Before the king could answer, a loud horn suddenly echoed outside the castle walls. Both of them turned toward the massive windows. The king's eyes flashed with alertness. That horn, he muttered. Another blast echoed. Louder this time. The king's expression changed instantly. From frustration to deadly seriousness. Stay here, he ordered. What's happening? But the king was already moving toward the throne room doors. Before leaving, he glanced back at her. His glowing eyes softened for just a fraction of a second. Then he disappeared. Moments later, the castle erupted into chaos. Shouts echoed through the halls. Warriors running. Weapons clashing. And then, a terrifying howl split the night sky. Elena's blood ran cold. Something was attacking the Lycan kingdom. And she was trapped in the middle of it. The night the castle was attacked. The sound of chaos spread through the castle like wildfire. From the throne room, Elena could hear warriors shouting orders as they rushed through the halls. Metal clanged against metal as weapons were drawn. Another horn blast echoed across the night. Louder. Urgent. Something terrible was happening outside the castle walls. Elena rushed toward one of the tall windows overlooking the courtyard. Her breath caught. Dozens of warriors were running across the stone courtyard below. Some had already shifted into their massive wolf forms. Huge creatures with glowing eyes and powerful bodies. But they weren't preparing for battle inside the castle. They were preparing for something outside the gates. And whatever it was, it looked bad. Flames suddenly erupted in the distance. Elena gasped. Beyond the castle walls, the forest glowed orange with fire. They're attacking, she whispered. Footsteps thundered through the hallway behind her. Several soldiers rushed past the throne room doors. One of them noticed her standing alone. "My lady," he said quickly. Elena blinked. "Did you just call me? You must come with us." His tone was urgent. "What's happening?" "Enemy pack." Her stomach twisted. "Enemy pack." "Yes." He grabbed a spear leaning against the wall. "They have been threatening the Lycan kingdom for months." Another loud crash shook the castle. Dust fell from the ceiling. "They're here now," the soldier said grimly. Elena's heart pounded. "Why?" Before the soldier could answer, a massive roar shook the night sky. It wasn't human. It wasn't even a normal wolf. It was something far more powerful. The soldier's face went pale. "That's their alpha." Another soldier ran into the throne room. "They've broken the outer gate." The first soldier cursed under his breath. "Protect the queen." Elena blinked again. "I'm not a queen." But the soldiers didn't seem interested in arguing. They quickly formed a protective circle around her. "You must stay behind us," one of them said firmly. Elena's pulse raced. "What about the king?" The soldiers exchanged glances. "He's already on the battlefield." Of course he was. The ruthless Lycan King would never hide while his kingdom was under attack. Suddenly, the throne room doors burst open. A wounded warrior staggered inside. "They're inside the courtyard," he shouted. Panic spread across the room. "How many?" "Hundreds." Elena's stomach dropped. Hundreds? That wasn't a raid. That was a war. Outside the castle windows, the night exploded with movement. Massive wolves leapt over the courtyard walls. Enemy warriors flooded into the castle grounds. Their howls echoed across the forest like thunder. The battle had begun. The Lycan Kingdom's warriors rushed forward to meet them. Claws clashed. Fangs snapped. The air filled with the terrifying sounds of wolves fighting. Elena pressed her hands against the window, her heart racing. Through the chaos, she saw him. The Lycan King. He stood at the center of the battlefield like a storm. But he wasn't in human form anymore. He had shifted. His wolf form was enormous. Twice the size of the others. Black fur gleamed under the moonlight as he tore through enemy wolves with terrifying speed. Every movement was powerful, deadly, fearless. Even the attacking wolves seemed hesitant to approach him. "He's unstoppable," one soldier whispered beside her. But the battle was far from over. More enemy wolves kept pouring into the courtyard. Then something strange happened. One of the attacking wolves suddenly leapt toward the castle window. Toward Elena. The glass shattered. The enormous wolf crashed into the throne room. The soldiers immediately attacked. But the creature was fast. It knocked two warriors aside with a single swipe of its claws. Elena stumbled backward in terror. The wolf's glowing red eyes locked onto her. Predator eyes. Hungry. Dangerous. "Kill the human," the creature growled in a deep voice. Elena froze. The soldiers rushed to defend her, but the wolf moved too quickly. It lunged forward. Straight at her. Elena squeezed her eyes shut. She thought she was about to die. But then, something strange happened. A sudden surge of heat exploded inside her chest. Her heart began pounding wildly. The room filled with a strange glowing light. The attacking wolf suddenly stopped mid-air, as if something invisible had grabbed it. The soldiers stared in shock. The wolf howled in pain. A burst of energy exploded from Elena's body. The creature was thrown across the throne room like a rag doll. It crashed into the stone wall and collapsed unconscious. Silence filled the room. Elena slowly opened her eyes. Her hands were glowing faintly. "What just happened?" she whispered. The soldiers stared at her in complete shock. "That." One of them swallowed nervously. "That was magic." Elena's heart raced. Magic. But humans didn't have magic. At least, not normal humans. Outside the castle, the Lycan King suddenly stopped fighting. His enormous wolf head lifted. His glowing eyes turned toward the castle. Toward the throne room. Toward Elena. He had felt it. The power. And for the first time since meeting her, The king realized something terrifying. His mate wasn't just human. She was something far more powerful. The power the king could feel. The throne room remained completely silent. The soldiers were still staring at Elena as if they had just witnessed a miracle. Or a nightmare. Elena slowly looked down at her hands. Just moments ago, they had been glowing. Now the strange light had faded, leaving only a faint warmth in her palms. "I didn't do anything," she said nervously. But no one in the room believed that. One of the soldiers cautiously approached the unconscious enemy wolf lying against the wall. The creature was barely breathing. "You threw him across the room without touching him," the soldier said quietly. Elena shook her head. "That's impossible." But deep inside, she knew it wasn't. Because she had felt it. A powerful force rising inside her chest. Something ancient. Something alive. Suddenly the throne room doors burst open. A powerful presence filled the room instantly. The Lycan King had returned. But this time he was back in his human form. His black hair was slightly messy, and small drops of blood stained the sleeve of his dark coat. His glowing golden eyes scanned the room quickly. Then they landed on Elena. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The king could feel it. The strange energy lingering in the air. He stepped closer slowly. What happened here? No one answered immediately. The soldiers looked at Elena. The king followed their gaze. His eyes narrowed. "Elena." Her heart skipped. "Yes." His voice was calm. Too calm. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she said quickly. But the king didn't look convinced. He walked across the throne room toward the unconscious enemy wolf. The creature groaned slightly. The king studied the deep cracks in the stone wall behind it. His eyes darkened. "This wolf weighs nearly 400 pounds. Elena's stomach twisted. And yet he was thrown across the room like a toy. The king slowly turned back toward her. "You expect me to believe you had nothing to do with this?" "I don't know what happened," she said honestly. The king stepped closer. The mate bond pulsed again between them. But now something else mixed with it. Power. Ancient power. The king could feel it clearly. It radiated from Elena like heat from a fire. "You're hiding something," he said quietly. "I'm not." The king stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke to the soldiers. "Leave us." Once again, the room emptied quickly. Soon only the two of them remained. The king walked slowly around her, studying her. "You are human," he said finally. "Yes. But humans do not possess magic." Elena hesitated. "Maybe I'm not a normal human." The king stopped walking. "That is exactly what concerns me." He moved in front of her again. "Tell me the truth." "I am telling the truth." "Where did your power come from?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't even know I had power until tonight." The king watched her carefully, trying to decide if she was lying. But her fear looked real. Her confusion looked real. Which meant only one thing. Even she didn't understand what she was. Suddenly, another soldier rushed into the throne room. "My king." The king turned sharply. "What is it?" "The enemy pack is retreating." The king's eyes narrowed. "That makes no sense. They suffered heavy losses." Of course they did. The Lycan King had been leading the battle himself. But enemy packs rarely retreated so quickly. Not unless something frightened them. The soldier continued. But before they left, he hesitated. What? They were shouting something. The king crossed his arms. What were they saying? The soldier swallowed. They said the prophecy had begun. The king's expression turned deadly serious. Prophecy? Yes, my king. And what prophecy would that be? The soldier glanced nervously at Elena. The one about the moons chosen. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The moons, what? But the king had already gone silent. Because he knew that prophecy. Every alpha in the werewolf world did. A prophecy spoken centuries ago. It told the story of a powerful woman chosen by the moon goddess. A woman who would possess magic strong enough to unite or destroy the werewolf kingdoms. A woman destined to stand beside the most powerful alpha alive. The Lycan King slowly turned his gaze back to Elena. His golden eyes searched her face. "You cannot be the one," he muttered. Elena blinked. "The one what?" But the king didn't answer. Because deep inside, he was beginning to fear the truth. The girl he had rejected as weak, the girl he thought was just a helpless human, might actually be the most powerful woman in the supernatural world. And she was his mate. The secret of Elena's birth. The throne room felt colder after the soldier spoke about the prophecy. Elena stood silently, watching the Lycan King. Something had changed in his expression. Earlier, he had looked annoyed by her presence. Now, he looked troubled. Deeply troubled. "The moon's chosen," Elena repeated quietly. The king's eyes flickered toward her. "You should not concern yourself with that." Her eyebrows pulled together. "You just said I might be part of it." "I said nothing of the sort." "But you looked at me like I was." The king turned away, walking toward the tall windows overlooking the battlefield outside the castle. The fires had begun to fade. Enemy wolves were retreating into the forest. But the tension in the air had not disappeared. The king placed his hands behind his back. "You are human," he said again. "Yes. And yet you possess power." "I guess so. Human magic users disappeared centuries ago." Elena blinked. "Wait, humans used to have magic?" "Yes." He turned slightly. But that bloodline was believed to be extinct. A strange uneasiness crept through Elena. "My father never told me anything about magic." The king's eyes narrowed. "Your father?" Elena stiffened. "What about him? You said he sold you to save your village." "Yes." The king looked thoughtful. "That story does not make sense." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "The trade agreement between my kingdom and your village involved food, medicine, and protection." Elena frowned. "Protection from what?" "Enemy packs. The same packs that had attacked tonight." "But your father was not supposed to give us a person." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her. "So, you didn't ask for me?" "No." "Then why did he say that?" The king walked closer again. "That is what I intend to find out." Elena's chest tightened. "You think he lied to me?" "I think there is more to this story." Before Elena could respond, another guard entered the throne room. "My king." The guard bowed respectfully. "The prisoners have been secured." The king nodded. "Bring one of them here." Elena looked confused. "Prisoners?" "Yes. We captured several wolves from the attacking pack." The king's voice turned cold. "They will answer some questions." A few minutes later, two warriors dragged an injured enemy wolf into the throne room. The creature was in human form now, but his red glowing eyes still burned with hatred. He looked at the Lycan King and spat blood onto the floor. "You think you've won tonight?" the prisoner growled. The king remained calm. "You attacked my kingdom. You stole what belongs to us." Elena frowned. "What does that mean?" The prisoner's red eyes suddenly locked onto her. And a wicked smile spread across his face. "There she is." Elena stepped back slightly. "Why is he looking at me like that?" The prisoner laughed. "The moon's chosen." The king's voice turned deadly. "You will speak carefully." "Oh, I will," the prisoner replied. His gaze never left Elena. "Our alpha has searched for her for years." Elena's heart raced. "Searched for who?" The prisoner smiled wider. "You." Silence filled the throne room. The king stepped forward slowly. "What are you talking about?" The prisoner chuckled. "The prophecy is real." The king's eyes flashed dangerously. "Explain." The moon goddess promised a woman with ancient power would rise again. The prisoner nodded toward Elena. "And she would belong to the strongest alpha alive." The king's jaw tightened. "You expect me to believe this human girl is the one from your prophecy?" The prisoner's smile widened even more. "She is not human." Elena felt her stomach drop. "What?" The king's voice was low. "Careful." But the prisoner didn't stop. She carries the blood of the moon witches. The room went silent. Even the soldiers looked shocked. The king's eyes darkened. That bloodline was destroyed centuries ago. So everyone believed. The prisoner looked directly at Elena again. But it survived. Elena's heart pounded violently. I don't understand any of this. The prisoner laughed again. You will. The king suddenly grabbed the prisoner by the collar. If you are lying. I'm not. The prisoner leaned closer. Our alpha attacked tonight for one reason. His voice dropped into a whisper. To claim her before you could. The king froze. The prisoner's red eyes glowed brighter. The war has already begun. He nodded toward Elena. And it's all because of her. Elena felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Her father selling her. The attack on the castle. The prophecy. And the terrifying truth that was beginning to unfold. She wasn't just the Lycan King's mate. She was the center of a war between powerful supernatural forces. And the world was coming for her. The king who could not ignore the bond. The throne room had grown eerily quiet again. The captured enemy wolf had been taken away, dragged back to the dungeon beneath the castle. But the words he had spoken still hung heavily in the air. She carries the blood of the moon witches. Elena stood near the center of the room, her mind spinning with questions. Across from her, the Lycan King stood motionless. His expression was darker than before. Not angry. Not confused. Concerned. Finally, he spoke. Look at me. Elena slowly raised her eyes to meet his glowing golden gaze. What if he's telling the truth? She asked softly. The king didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward her. Each step felt heavy with thought. Then the situation is worse than I imagined, he said quietly. Elena felt a chill run through her. Worse? Yes. He stopped only a few feet away. If enemy packs believe you are the moon's chosen, they will hunt you. Elena crossed her arms nervously. Why? Because whoever controls you, controls the prophecy. Her heart sank. So I'm basically a target. Yes. The honesty in his voice made the situation feel even more frightening. Elena took a slow breath. Well, that's great. The king studied her carefully. You are handling this surprisingly well. She let out a small, nervous laugh. I was sold by my father, kidnapped by werewolves, discovered magical powers, and now I'm apparently the center of a prophecy. She shrugged. At this point, I think I've already reached my daily limit for surprises. For the first time since they met, something unexpected happened. The Lycan King smiled. It was faint. But it was real. You are unusual, he admitted. Thanks, I think. The moment didn't last long. The king's expression quickly turned serious again. There is something else you should know. Elena felt her stomach tighten. What? The king hesitated. The mate bond. She nodded slowly. You said I was your mate. Yes. But you also said you wouldn't accept it. The king looked away briefly. That was before. Elena's heart skipped. Before what? Before I realized what you are. Her eyebrows pulled together. You mean a possible witch? Yes. That makes things worse, remember? Yes. So why does that change your mind? The king's golden eyes returned to hers. Because the bond will protect you. Elena blinked. What? Mate bonds create powerful connections between wolves. But I'm not a wolf. That doesn't matter. He stepped closer again. The bond will still strengthen your protection. Her heart began beating faster. You mean, you're accepting it? The king hesitated again. Then he sighed. I have no choice. Elena wasn't sure how to feel about that answer. Wow, she said. That's the most romantic acceptance speech I've ever heard. The king raised an eyebrow. You prefer poetry? Maybe something a little less like a business decision. A small smirk appeared on his face. You are bold. Someone has to be. The mate bond pulsed between them again. This time stronger. Warmer. The king seemed to feel it too. His voice lowered slightly. You are not afraid of me. Elena shrugged. I probably should be. Yes. But you saved my life earlier. The king looked confused. What? That enemy wolf would have killed me if you hadn't built a kingdom strong enough to fight them. The king blinked. That is a very indirect compliment. It's the best you're getting. Another small smile appeared on his face. But the moment was suddenly interrupted. A loud knock echoed through the throne room doors. My king. The king turned sharply. Enter. A soldier rushed inside. His face looked tense. What is it? The soldier bowed quickly. Scouts have returned from the forest. And they found something. The soldier swallowed. More enemy packs are gathering. Elena felt her stomach drop. How many? Thousands. The king's expression hardened instantly. Where? Across the northern mountains. Elena looked at him nervously. Is that bad? The king answered without hesitation. Yes. He walked toward the large map table near the throne. If multiple packs are joining together, this is no longer just a raid. It's a war, Elena said quietly. The king nodded. And they are all coming for one reason. His golden eyes turned back toward her. You. Elena swallowed. Well, that's terrifying. The king's voice grew firm. Which is why from this moment forward, he stepped closer to her again. You will not leave my side. Her eyes widened slightly. That sounds intense. It is necessary. And if I say no? The king leaned closer. His voice dropped to a low whisper. The mate bond will not allow it. Elena felt her heart skip again. Because suddenly the bond between them felt stronger than ever. And whether she liked it or not, the Lycan King had just claimed her protection. The night the mate bond awakened. Night had fallen again over the Lycan kingdom. The castle, which had been filled with chaos earlier, now hummed with tense preparation. Warriors moved quickly through the halls carrying weapons and armor. The war was coming. From the tall balcony outside her chamber, Elena could see torches burning across the castle walls as guards took their positions. The forest beyond the kingdom looked darker than ever. Somewhere out there, thousands of enemy wolves were gathering. All because of her. Elena rested her hands on the cold stone railing and sighed. Some birthday, she muttered quietly. Behind her, the chamber door creaked open. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The presence alone was unmistakable. The Lycan King. You should be resting, his deep voice said. Elena turned slowly. You should be leading a war council. I already did. He stepped onto the balcony beside her. Moonlight illuminated his tall figure, making his golden eyes glow even brighter. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there looking out at the forest. Finally Elena broke the silence. Is it really as bad as the soldier said? The king didn't lie. Yes. Her shoulders sank slightly. So they're really coming. Yes. Because of me. The king turned toward her. Because they believe you are the moon's chosen. Elena sighed again. I still don't understand what that means. The king leaned against the balcony railing. Centuries ago, there were powerful witches who served the moon goddess. The moon witches? Yes. They were stronger than normal magic users. How strong? The king thought for a moment. Strong enough to change the fate of entire kingdoms. Elena stared at him. And you think I'm one of them? I don't know yet. But the prisoner seemed pretty convinced. The king nodded slowly. That is what concerns me. Elena looked back at the forest. If that's true, then why did my father never tell me? That is another question we will need answered. Elena hugged her arms around herself. Assuming we survive this war. The king's voice became firm. You will survive. She looked up at him. You sound very sure. I am. Why? The king hesitated slightly. Then he spoke honestly. Because you are my mate. The words hung softly in the night air. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest again. The same strange warmth she had felt earlier. The mate bond. You keep saying that, she said quietly. It is the truth. But you hated the idea a few hours ago. I did. And now? The king looked directly into her eyes. Now I understand it may be the only way to protect you. Elena tilted her head slightly. You really don't know how to say romantic things, do you? The king frowned. I am not trying to be romantic. I noticed. Despite the tension of the night, Elena laughed softly. And something surprising happened. The king laughed too. Just a little. But it was enough to change the atmosphere between them. The distance that had existed earlier began to fade. Elena looked up at the moon above them. So this mate bond? Yes. What exactly does it do? The king's eyes softened slightly. It connects us. How? In many ways. Elena frowned. That's not very specific. The king stepped closer. Emotionally. The warmth in Elena's chest grew stronger. Mentally. Her heart began beating faster. And physically. Elena suddenly became very aware of how close he was standing. The mate bond pulsed again. Stronger than ever. The king clearly felt it too. His breathing slowed slightly. Elena, he said quietly. Yes. Do you feel that? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Yes. The air between them felt charged with energy. Neither of them moved. But the bond pulled them closer. Almost like an invisible force. You should go inside, the king said suddenly. Elena blinked. What? This is not the time for distractions. She raised an eyebrow. You think I'm distracting you? Yes. That might be the first compliment you've given me. The king sighed. You are impossible. And yet you're stuck with me. The king looked at her again. And this time there was no hesitation in his voice. Yes. The word surprised even him. Because the truth had finally settled in his mind. The mate bond wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an inconvenience. It was destiny. And for the first time, the Lycan King didn't want to fight it anymore. Just then, a loud horn echoed across the castle walls. Both of them turned toward the forest instantly. Torches were moving in the distance. Hundreds of them. Elena's heart dropped. They're here. The king's expression hardened. Yes. The war had begun. And the moon's chosen was standing beside him. The war for the Lycan kingdom. The horn continued echoing across the night. Deep. Loud. A warning that the enemy had finally arrived. From the castle balcony, Elena could now clearly see them. Thousands of torches moving through the dark forest like a river of fire. Enemy wolves. An entire army. Her heart pounded. That's a lot of them. Beside her, the Lycan King watched silently. His expression was calm. But his glowing golden eyes burned with the dangerous focus of a predator preparing for war. Yes, he said. Elena swallowed nervously. You still think we're going to survive this? The king turned toward her. We will. You sound very confident. I have fought worse odds before. Elena gave a weak smile. Well, that's comforting. Suddenly, another horn blast sounded from the castle walls. My king, a soldier shouted from below. They're approaching the outer gate. The king nodded once. Prepare the warriors. The soldier ran off immediately. The king turned back to Elena. You need to stay inside. Elena crossed her arms. Let me guess, for my safety? Yes. But they're here because of me. That does not change my order. Elena sighed. You're very bossy. I am a king. That's not an excuse. Before the king could respond, a loud explosion shook the ground. Both of them turned toward the forest. A massive fireball had just slammed into the outer gate. The enemy army had brought war mags. That's new, Elena said nervously. The king's expression darkened. They should not possess magic like that. Another explosion rocked the castle walls. The battle had begun. Inside, the king ordered again. Elena hesitated. Please. The word surprised both of them. But she nodded. Fine. The king gave a short nod of approval and quickly moved toward the staircase leading to the courtyard. But before leaving, He stopped and looked back at her. Elena. Yes. No matter what happens tonight. His golden eyes softened slightly. You must stay alive. Elena tried to joke. I'll do my best. The king disappeared down the stairs. Moments later, the sounds of battle erupted across the castle grounds. Elena hurried back inside the chamber, but she couldn't stop herself from returning to the window overlooking the battlefield. The courtyard had become chaos. Hundreds of wolves were fighting beneath the moonlight. Claws clashed. Fangs snapped. Howls filled the air. And at the center of the battlefield, the Lycan King shifted. His massive black wolf form towered over the others. He charged into the enemy lines like a living storm. Wolves scattered before him. But the enemy numbers were overwhelming. More and more wolves kept flooding through the broken gate. Suddenly, a powerful wave of magic exploded across the battlefield. Elena gasped. Enemy war mags stood beyond the walls, chanting spells. Dark energy shot across the courtyard, knocking several of the king's warriors to the ground. That's not good, Elena whispered. Another blast of magic slammed into the castle walls. The stone cracked. Elena's heart raced. If the enemy broke through the castle completely, everyone inside would die. And then she saw something terrifying. 3 enormous enemy alphas stepped into the courtyard. They were larger than normal wolves. Their red eyes glowed with power. And they were heading straight toward the Lycan King. Elena's stomach twisted. That's not fair. The 3 alphas attacked at once. The Lycan King fought fiercely, but even he struggled against 3 powerful opponents. Claws ripped through the air. Wolves slammed into the stone courtyard. The battle grew more brutal. One of the enemy alphas managed to strike the king across the shoulder. The massive black wolf stumbled slightly. Elena felt the pain instantly. The mate bond. Her chest tightened painfully. You're hurt, she whispered. Down below, the king roared in anger and lunged back into the fight. But the enemy alphas pressed harder. They were trying to kill him. Elena gripped the window ledge. No. The strange heat inside her chest began rising again. Stronger this time. The same power she had felt earlier. But now it was much more intense. The bond pulsed. The king was in danger. And her magic responded. Elena, stop, she whispered to herself. But the power didn't listen. A glowing silver light began forming around her hands. The air inside the chamber vibrated. Outside, one of the enemy alphas leapt toward the king's throat. The Lycan King barely managed to block the attack. But another alpha rushed in from the side. The king couldn't stop both. Elena's heart exploded with fear. No. The power inside her finally erupted. A massive wave of silver energy burst from the castle tower. It shot across the battlefield like lightning. The energy slammed into the attacking alphas. The 3 wolves were thrown violently across the courtyard. The entire battlefield froze. Every wolf stopped fighting. Every warrior turned toward the castle tower. Toward Elena. The glowing silver power surrounded her like moonlight. The enemy wolves backed away in fear. Because they recognized that power. The power of the moon's chosen. And down in the courtyard. The Lycan King lifted his massive wolf head. His golden eyes locked onto her. For the first time, he truly understood who his mate was. The moon's chosen and the Lycan King. The battlefield fell into a strange silence. Moments earlier, the castle courtyard had been filled with chaos, wolves clashing, warriors shouting, magic exploding through the night. But now everything had stopped. Every wolf, every warrior, every enemy. All eyes turned toward the tall castle tower. Toward the glowing figure standing in the window. Elena. Silver light surrounded her like liquid moonlight. The power flowing through her body felt both terrifying and beautiful. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the battlefield. Did I just do that? The energy slowly pulsed around her like a heartbeat. Below in the courtyard, the 3 enemy alpha wolves struggled to stand. They had been thrown across the battlefield by the blast of magic. One of them growled angrily. That power. It's real. Another alpha stared at the tower in fear. The moon's chosen. The words spread through the enemy army like wildfire. Fear replaced their earlier confidence. For centuries, the legend of the moon's chosen had been whispered across werewolf territories. A witch blessed by the moon goddess herself. A being capable of controlling ancient lunar magic. And now she was standing right in front of them. Alive. Awakened. And aligned with the Lycan King. The massive black wolf standing in the center of the battlefield slowly shifted back into human form. The Lycan King rose from the ground, tall and powerful. Blood stained his shoulder where the alpha had struck him earlier. But he barely seemed to notice the wound. His golden eyes remained fixed on the tower. On Elena. He could feel it now. The mate bond had changed. It had grown stronger. Much stronger. And the magic surrounding her was connected to him. Elena, he whispered. Up in the tower, Elena felt the bond pull her attention downward. Her eyes found the king immediately. The silver magic around her slowly faded, though faint glowing sparks still lingered in the air. She looked at her hands. I think I broke something. Down below, several warriors laughed nervously. But the enemy army wasn't laughing. Their leader stepped forward slowly. A tall, scarred alpha wolf shifted into human form. His red eyes glowed with fury. You, he snarled toward Elena. You should have remained hidden. Elena frowned slightly. Honestly, I didn't even know I could do that until 5 seconds ago. The alpha ignored her humor. You belong to the moon goddess. That's what everyone keeps saying. Your power was meant to belong to our army. The Lycan King stepped forward. No. The single word echoed across the courtyard. The enemy alpha sneered. You cannot protect her forever. The king's golden eyes burned dangerously. I do not need forever. The alpha's expression twisted into anger. Kill them. The enemy wolves roared and surged forward again. The battle reignited instantly. But this time the Lycan warriors fought with renewed strength. Because now they had hope. And Elena felt it. The power inside her stirred again. Stronger than before. She stepped away from the window. If they want a moon's chosen. She took a deep breath. Then I guess they're about to get one. She hurried down the castle stairs. The silver magic returned, glowing faintly around her hands. By the time she reached the courtyard entrance, the battle was raging again. The Lycan King fought at the center of the chaos. 2 enemy alphas attacked him at once. He blocked their claws, but they pushed him back step by step. Elena, he suddenly shouted. She stepped into the courtyard. Moonlight instantly intensified around her. The silver magic burst forward again. This time it spread across the entire battlefield like a glowing wave. Enemy wolves were thrown backward. Dark magic spells shattered in the air. Even the ground trembled slightly. The enemy army froze. Fear filled their eyes. Because now there was no doubt. The moon's chosen had awakened. The enemy alpha leader stared at Elena with pure hatred. You will regret this. Elena crossed her arms. Probably. But not tonight. She raised her glowing hand. The silver energy exploded outward one final time. The wave of lunar power blasted through the battlefield. Enemy wolves fled instantly. Those who remained were forced back beyond the castle walls. Within minutes, the massive army that had threatened the kingdom was retreating into the dark forest. The war was over. Silence slowly returned to the courtyard. Lycan warriors stood frozen in disbelief. Then suddenly someone shouted, "We won!" Cheers erupted across the castle grounds. Howls of victory filled the night sky. Elena exhaled slowly. That was intense. Footsteps approached behind her. She turned. The Lycan King stood there. His golden eyes studied her carefully. You are unharmed. She smiled slightly. Thanks to you. You saved this kingdom. Elena shrugged. I guess the moon goddess had a plan. The king stepped closer. Yes. Elena tilted her head. What? I believe she did. The mate bond pulsed gently between them. The king reached out and gently took her hand. The silver magic around her faded completely. Elena. Yes. You are my mate. This time his voice held no hesitation. No doubt. No resistance. Just truth. Elena smiled softly. Well, it took you long enough to admit it. The king almost smiled. Almost. Then he lifted her hand and kissed it gently. Around them, the warriors watched with excitement. Their king had finally claimed his mate. And she had just saved their entire kingdom. Elena looked up at the moon above the castle. So, what happens now? The king's voice softened. Now. Yes. Now the Lycan kingdom has its queen. Elena blinked. Oh. Then she laughed. Well, that escalated quickly. The king finally smiled. And under the full moon, the Lycan king stood beside his true mate. The moon's chosen. The woman who had changed the fate of the entire kingdom. And so, the war that began with betrayal ended under the light of the full moon. The human girl who had been sold like a slave, became the most powerful woman in the werewolf kingdom. Not just the Lycan king's mate, but the moon's chosen. And from that night on, the Lycan kingdom would never be the same again. Because beside the most feared alpha in the world, stood the woman who had changed his destiny forever. But what do you think? If you discovered the most feared Lycan king was your true mate, would you accept him, or run away? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for more unforgettable romance stories.